Just starting in a minute here.
Kuldeep, I did follow just like you. Just thank you for sharing. And I don't have a nice Adidas jacket on top.
Come on, see, that's like
Tommy.
You know, I've always been informal, man. It's like CK is the epitome of the presentation. we learn from you on those things, man.
Okay. Thanks everybody for joining. My name is Faz Sayed. I'm a business agility coach, transformation coach based in Chicago. And it's my pleasure to have my dear friends, colleagues, experts in transformations, and I let them introduce themselves. First, I'd like James, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm James Smith. I'm a strategy and execution advisor. Started out way too many years ago, longer than these guys, I think, writing code, and spent a lot of time at shrink wrap software companies. That's an old school term there. And then moved on from there several years ago to consulting full time for state government and F-250s. And this is what's helped for me is I've got a pretty broad background now in building up teams and even technology organizations. And that's helped me a lot in this this new effort as a consultant that I've been at for the last several years. I've had a great time with it.
Excellent. CK?
Hi, my name is CK Taneja. I have been doing organization change management for almost 25 years now, various kinds of organizations, first from within the organization and now helping organizations identify what their problems are and solve those problems by business agility. So I'm a leadership and enterprise coach.
Excellent. Welcome. Kuldeep?
Hey, good morning, everybody, or good evening, wherever you are. My name is Kuldeep Nayak. I am a principal consultant with Infosys. As James just mentioned, I started my journey the same way. Started with code, got into code software architecture, solution architecture, a little bit of program management, and then stepped into the Agile realm. Pretty much education-wise, I've gotten a master's degree in information systems and org design. So my niche is really into the strategy that goes behind organizational transformations, as well as getting into teams, moving into different ways of working, and looking at portfolios and how they can be more efficient and more lean. Thanks, Faz, for this opportunity to be part of this session today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have all of you here. As transformations are broadening across the companies, I feel it's a great opportunity for folks like ourselves who are still learning from each other and our own experiences to share what we have in terms of knowledge. And for me, having three of you with me on the call, as people I can learn from and be able to have you guys share your knowledge with our audience, it's really an honor for me. And I look forward to many more sessions like this. Today, I'm really excited because the topic that we have, I don't think can be covered in just one session. So if we need, we'll have many other sessions on this topic. and we'll take an agile approach. We'll take an incremental approach, and we'll just see how far we can get today. And we'll learn from James today, in particular. Three of us, CK, Kuldeep, and I, have started to become more like the regular faces here, and I think you will see us getting there. And I'm looking forward to having James share his knowledge as well and join the club as well. And our goal really is to increase our community of folks like us who can actually share their knowledge and be able to be part of the community as well. So James is our chief guest. James, and we have had the I've had the opportunity to get to know James over the
Thanks.
last couple of months or few months, and I've learned that James has some really interesting perspectives that I am, every as a coach, as I go into organizations, I'm learning from different organizations and people, and also other coaches as well. And similarly, with the more I've worked with James, I feel like he has a lot of different perspectives that really teases my brain. So I wanted to kind of have James share some of those. And as far as portfolio management is concerned, James, the first question I wanted to ask you, when people ask you what is portfolio management, what's the best way to describe that, in an enterprise setting? How would you,
Yeah,
what is,
well, I have to reduce everything down to a sentence elevator pitch, right? I'm that simple. That's how I think. So when I think of an organization's portfolio, is their collection of value, that market value that starts with propositions and ends up with something that the customer can pull. I think in terms of inventory, everything about flow and inventory, but it ends up in something that the customer can pull, and that's where the organization makes their money. It's as simple as that. Their collection of value, right?
okay. Yeah, and what I recommend or request from my guests here is that if you have any comments, feel free to jump in, keep it more interactive, and obviously I'll engage you as well. We've had the luxury of being, getting to know each other as well. So let's just keep it interactive and casual. Or CK or Kuldeep, what are your thoughts?
So I tend to agree with what James has, right? It's really a collection of value. And if we look at it from a traditional org design perspective, it was really a portfolio was most commonly defined as a collection of programs that were coming together. And
Mhm.
most often they were, segmented by some channel or business function that allowed us to operate and maintain the delivery side of things. I think we are in a very interesting kind of phase over the last few years where the term portfolio itself is shifting, right? As you think about a portfolio now, is it really channel oriented? Is it really revenue oriented? Or is it, as James mentioned, is it value oriented? And if we're value orienting it, then how are we cross-cutting the design of the typical pyramid structure to align for that value, right? So that's where the definition of the portfolio evolves as we kind of move forward.
Yeah. Okay.
True, true. So I agree with what Kuldeep said. What James is suggesting and is doing is the desired state, and that's how the organizations should be. But what Kuldeep said is the state that the others have been putting together programs and calling them or projects and calling them portfolios, which does not really always deliver value. So it should be the way to look at it is customer value and the delivery of the value.
Mm.
And that's a big shift that has to come in. Many organizations are already making that shift. Others
Yeah.
are trying to do it in various different ways. But
Yeah. So when we talk about value, we talk a lot about products. So James, where do products fit into the portfolio?
Well, I mean, a product is the manifestation of what an organization has to sell. and make money with, right?
Yeah.
So how do we turn what's in our portfolio in the most efficient way into a product that can be sold? Okay. Or that,
Yeah.
as I always like to say, the market can pull from you, right? There's all kinds of things that go into that. Uh, the thing is that if I were competing with you, Fez, for a particular market, okay, and what I tended to do was for every product that I developed, it was done independently by different teams, okay. But what you're doing is trying to, at the same time, figure out where the commonalities are and have those products use similar components or a common component. So now you just cut the cost on your product, whereas I'm still doing it the expensive way. So that's
Mm.
when all this fun stuff starts kicking in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, so when we talk about portfolio management, when we talk about agile portfolio management, um, how would you best describe that, James?
Well,
How do you do it in agile, basically?
yeah. The issue is with if you're going to do portfolio management in an agile way, you've got to be able to um, iterate over your products in such a way that they're developed in a continuously improving fashion, and not you're not going to design them completely up front and then expect to actually have a product after you've done all that, because that doesn't work. That's waterfall. Okay. So how you're going to handle your agile portfolio is you've got to be able to come up with a process that lets you inspect and adapt along the way. And that gives you some advantages there. That's going to give you an opportunity to identify waste and cut cost and how you're developing those products, right? And it's also going to help you in the end target your market better. So
Mm.
those are important components of an agile portfolio that you can do with an agile portfolio that you can't if you're not executing your portfolio in an agile way. And additionally, probably the thing that's most important with an agile portfolio that you can't do if you're not developing it in an agile way is that over time you're delivering more. I always like to say this: more signal and less noise. Okay, which your stockholders are going to love because what they want is certainty and stability. Now, a good agile portfolio will beat a waterfall portfolio every time, because they're better capable and better structured for delivering certainty and stability.
Mm.
Yeah,
So,
even though in that that's almost counterintuitive, right? They're always the usual complaints about agile is we're just throwing stuff out there and fumbling around and trying to get it done, but that's not the case. And I'm going to go into an example of absolutely where that's not the case, and
yeah,
it's completely counterintuitive, but it works.
yeah. CK, when it comes to defining portfolio, right? And let's say we are starting, I mean, in the beginning, what are some of the best practices? How do you really start? Where do you start from?
So generally, you have to start with the customer. So it's a dramatically opposite view. When you are in a product-driven thinking, you start thinking from the product. When you are in agile portfolio mindset, then you start thinking from the customer and what the customer wants. So your
Mm.
entire suite of products is being developed around the customer experience and customer journey. Now,
Mm.
of course, you cannot pick up every customer base that you are going to do. So,
Right.
and that's where agility comes into place, that which is the customer segment who you want to first address, who finds your offerings valuable, and the service development is feasible for them. That's what is going to create a sustainable product development and portfolio management, right? So if I want to keep on sustaining on that, I have to start with the customer, understand the customer, and build things around the customer, because that is where the value is. Links to the first word that came out of James' mouth was value. to the customer, right? So
Yeah, I think, see, when you start there,
yeah,
the most important thing that I've learned is so far is when you put the customer first and you start defining that value, um, more than even the term portfolio just coming in. You start with that value stream, right? Like
right.
any large organization today, you're pretty much in a value stream where you're trying to attract customers, sell them something, and then you're trying to support that product that you just sold them, right? So if you look at it from a very high level sales and service type of value stream, now you're in a mode where you can actually define what are the products that are actually being used. And once the products are defined, you can actually determine like what are the portfolios within these products that we can now start looking at together holistically, right? So it kind of, when we say the definition of an agile portfolio, it really starts at this value stream definition, right? Because how do things really work? Like I've been with my full-time job before I started getting into consulting very short time ago. So most of my work has been within one company for a long time, and we struggled, right? So the large, an example in the large financials, right? You look at these mobile apps like Robinhood, right? Like for trading, free trading, just go in, put in your money, and you're good to go, right? And all these big firms struggled to have that kind of a platform because of the complexity of flow through their organizations of that value. And they realize that if they don't fix that, right, using some level of agility at that portfolio level, they're going to fall to what these smaller companies are coming with, like how Quicken does their loans or mortgages, right? You get Robinhood doing your investments, right? Soon these guys start realizing that, okay, if we don't have a product in the market that actually takes this, we're going to start losing segments of our customers because they're just going to go there.
Yeah, you know what, Kuldeep, that is an awesome point. I mean, awesome. And the greatest example of that of all time, of course, is Amazon.com.
Yep.
So let's talk about what putting the customer first really means. It's not a positive thing. It's a business thing. We're just talking about business here.
Yeah.
But what putting the customer really means is how easy are you going to make it to be able to take money from them? That really is the case. And that's what Amazon has done. I love I think in flow all the time in terms of flow. And back in about 2003, the legend goes that Bezos said, look, if you guys don't build out this API inventory, to where all systems are talking to each other and we're eliminating as much waste in our system as possible, I'm going to get rid of you and find somebody else who can do it. He was smart enough to realize that back then. So now what Amazon, whatever our definition of putting the customer first is, what Amazon has done is they put the customer first in a way that allows them to take money from the customer as easy as possible, and that is that superior delivery system that they have, right? And they were able to identify that. I mean, Bezos has been brilliant in that regard. You recognized this a long time ago. But I just love that, the notion of putting the customer first, really meaning, well, how easy are we going to be able to take money from them?
Yep.
That's the reality of business. So
That's very true. That's very true. Yeah, I mean, Kuldeep and I actually were discussing this week. We were brainstorming, and I was trying to figure out, as far as there's so many different ways that we define products these days. But ultimately, the question in my head always is product always associated to dollars, right? Because it's ultimately it is about making money. Whatever we talk about, portfolio, everything, and we talk about value, and value is not always money, but at least there is a huge component of being able to generate money and revenue as part of that. And that's a discussion that I love to have at some point as well with you guys.
yeah.
The thing that you talked about Amazon, right? Are there other companies that, James, in your mind, are just best examples of how they're building their portfolios, roadmaps, and in an incremental manner? We were talking about one yesterday. I'd love for you to talk through that a little more, and love
Yeah,
to hear from you at others as well.
Absolutely. I've got about 10 minutes if you guys can spare it. And I
Yeah.
want to talk about SpaceX. That's what I want to talk about. These guys are awesome, and I'm going to tell you why. Just give me a chance here. All right. Let's go back to you guys hear me okay at this point?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go back to the SN9 flight test. That was about a month ago. The video of that is on YouTube. All you got to do is type in SN9. It'll come right up. Okay. So I love this stuff because in my opinion, it's one of the best displays of business agility I've ever seen. Okay. So let me explain here. All right. I'm going to set the scene. They're getting ready for liftoff. You see SN9 venting liquid oxygen and methane on its own pad at Boca Chica, which is their test facility. Boca Chica is right next to the coast. You know, that's the safest way to test rockets is right over the ocean, right? So, and maybe what's bizarre is this picture of maybe a quarter of a mile away, SN10 has already stood up the next rocket. And by the way, what SN9 and SN10 mean is kind of a dry joke. It's just serial number. SN9
Oh,
and SN10. So pretty creative there. It's like anti-creative. So SN10 is already waiting on its own flight. That's a clue there about their delivery system, which is so awesome. Okay, so we have a successful liftoff, and John Innsbrucker is the commentator for SpaceX flights, at least for the SN series. He starts commentating on the flight, right? So SN9 reaches apogee at 10 kilometers, and then the rocket begins its slow descent like a floating leaf, thanks to the flaps on the body of the rocket. That's so cool. And by the way, I would like to think they got some inspiration from, the Virgin project of the passenger rocket, because they did the same thing, but they did it 20 years ago. They have flaps on their rocket that lets them just float down like this, right? So, so when SN9 gets close to the launch pad, it starts to rotate 90 degrees to point its landing legs toward the pad because, SpaceX wants to be able to reuse their rockets and land them, right? And while, in NASA's history, the only landing vehicle they've had is the shuttle, and all rockets generally splash down into the ocean, right? So one engine fires to slow the rocket down to landing speed as it starts to rotate. Okay. Well, we know what happens next, right? If you guys watch that video, you realize that SN9 could not make the turn and it crashed into the pad. Okay. And it right into the pad where it started from. Okay. So we see all this happening, which is fascinating. SN10 is a quarter mile away while all this is happening. So a short pause from John Innsbruck before he starts talking, the commentator. And then he says, well, obviously we had a landing problem. But then in a single conversation, he strings together all the successful subtests that occurred during this larger test of SN9. That's a hint right there. Think acceptance test for a work item. But one of the acceptance tests failed, right? This is rocket science here, okay?
Yeah.
So, what I thought was equally as charming about that test is that even though SN9 crashed on landing, it crashed in just about exactly the same spot it took off from. So I'd say, yeah, they're pretty much in the ballpark. They're going to solve this issue. All right. Okay. So here's some takeaways from all this. If I were to describe the Agile mindset in one short sentence, what would it be? I got to simplify everything because I'm a simple person. So I offer this up. It's iterating from problem to solution, inspecting and adapting along the way. That's it. It's that simple. Okay. So how does SpaceX display this mindset? Okay. Rapid prototyping and generating lots of data from that prototyping along the way. I keep saying along the way here. all right, in our journey. That's SpaceX's approach to business agility. So were you expecting a more complicated answer, like they have this big, heavy framework that is used or in place? Agility executed, and this is why it's important, to work with people of experience like us. We've got a ton of experience here because we can see this. We eliminate the waste in the system, and we realize that agility executed is actually quite simple. All right. Okay, so interestingly, when NASA first started working with SpaceX, they thought for sure SpaceX would get somebody killed, given how SpaceX was all about rapid prototyping. And this is the beautiful thing about delivering in an agile way. Actually, NASA started seeing the opposite happen. SpaceX started delivering more certainty in shorter time frames than NASA ever could, because NASA is saddled with meeting these multi-year budgets provided by Congress. Fewer tests are executed, less data is collected, fewer opportunities for inspecting and adapting. The program is somewhat shredded by political interests and involving military contractors and all those kinds of things. They have to deal with all that, right? SpaceX doesn't. So, in spite of best intentions by some great NASA scientists and engineers, I'm not taking anything away from them. They work with what they've got.
Yeah.
Okay. They cannot consistently get past that 3 nines barrier, 99.9% reliability under the absolute best of circumstances. That's good. Okay. For them. And it's because their system of delivery is not agile. They can't inspect and adapt quickly enough to increase signal and decrease noise in their value stream in a rapid way so that failures are kept small. And here's what I like about small failures and how they affect your agile value stream. We know the difference between a small failure and a large failure, right? A small failure is a data generating opportunity for continuous improvement. That's all that is. A large failure could be project ending disaster. All right. You do your delivery stream right and do it in an agile way. Small failures are just opportunities for continuous improvement. That's it. All right. So even though it may initially seem counterintuitive, I was talking about this early on, a portfolio executed in an agile fashion will achieve far more certainty and stability in less time than any method that doesn't provide the same opportunities to rapidly inspect and adapt. So while NASA is stuck at 2 or 3 nines of reliability, SpaceX is going to end up making spaceflight as reliable as driving a car. I'm telling you, count on it.
Yeah.
It's going to take years to get there, but SpaceX will get to that reliability. So remember, keep it simple, like SpaceX. I'm talking to everybody listening out there, and this is what we preach, to our teams and our clients. We want to keep it simple like SpaceX, iterating from problem to solution, inspecting and adapting along the way. And further, like Leffingwell says, Dean Leffingwell, he started Scaled Agile. All we're trying to do is have an organizational conversation that starts with strategic opinions and ends with executable facts. Okay. What I loved about what John Innsbruck was doing, he delivered all those tests and described them in a conversational way. Beautiful thing, Okay. So before you just throw a framework at your organization and expect it to solve your problems, think about what you're trying to accomplish and keep it as simple as possible. Because like I always say, don't add complexity unless the complexity is worth the dysfunction it addresses. Then if it's worth the dysfunction, add it. Okay. But start simple with a simple reference. Okay. So here's a segue I'd love for us to get into and explore for the rest of our session, if you guys feel like it. Okay. 1, alignment points in the form of teams that. 2, create a flow that. 3, produces a backlog that. 4, delivers an inventory of products that the consumer and markets want to pull. Okay. We're talking about. So I appreciate you guys' time on that.
Can you say that again, James? Last.
Okay, yeah. 1, alignment points in the form of teams that 2, create a flow that 3, produces a backlog that 4, delivers an inventory of products that the consumer and markets want to pull.
That's cool.
So we're talking about teams, backlogs, working test product,
Yep.
and flow.
Right.
Flow. So yeah, and by the way, real quick, I gotta pimp my book here. If you want a reference to template a complete system of delivery, and that includes great templates for your Scrum ceremonies in here as well, please check out my book. It's going to save you a ton of time. It starts with, even at the investment level, which we don't talk about a whole lot, and I'd love for us to get into, or for this particular group, because that requires a lot of experience, talking about the investment level, which lives above the portfolio level. So it goes through the templates for the investment level, the portfolio level, all the way to delivery, and even includes Scrum templates. So please check out this book. It'll save you a ton of time.
What does it say? Can you show us? Well, you barely showed us to the book. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here,
Yeah, you might want to bring it closer to the camera.
Little higher.
Yeah, bring it closer.
Yeah,
there you go.
We go. Yeah, Agile V2 Coaches Field Manual.
Cool.
Right. Already on version 3. All I have is a hard copy. I need to go back and do the Kindle. I did it once, and it was too complicated, and I couldn't get anybody to volunteer to do it for me. So I've got to go back and do that. But the hard copy is available, and it will save you a ton of time. And it's really learnings that I've picked up along the way from teams. And these guys, like I've joined on this podcast here. I appreciate that so much. And it's really a collection of all that and a simplification, because you need simple people like me to interpret this stuff for you.
and guys, I'll add in here, having read this book, compared to a lot of Agile books that are out there on the market, James stands by his, basic principle. He's a simple guy. And the best part about this book is it's in plain kitchen English. Okay. There's no complexity in like, okay, what did I just read? And now how do I interpret this paragraph? Right. It doesn't go into the theoretical side of things. It's very simple. And as he mentioned, this entire flow, right? Like it's you can see the flow coming in his templates, right? It's all about, guys, have you used these checkpoints along your flow to make sure there's a readiness coming in as you actually move forward? So definitely check it out. It's a great read.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much, Kuldeep. We should all be able to say, given all of the levels in our portfolio, how many statuses does it take to get from just thinking about something all the way to delivering on that? Do we have an idea about that? As a coach out there, you should have an idea about what that looks like, right? Yeah. It may not be the same for everybody, and that's fine. But it's a point of pride in your value stream to be able to know in general how many statuses, 60, 70, 80, how many statuses does it take to start with an opinion and end up with something that is deliverable to the customer, right? And plus, also, you get all these awesome pictures of Miami in there. So that's it's like a vacation book as well, a vacation travel guide of Miami. So anyway,
and that's where James rubs it in. The one picture in the book that's really interesting, right? But it also makes you very jealous is James sitting on his balcony. He's taking a picture of all these cruise ships coming into Miami. And he says, look, this is like a Kanban system out there. And I'm like, right, nice. Now, are you trying to do something, or are you just rubbing it in that, look, I'm in Miami?
Well, I was rubbing it in.
Deep, you are not any less as well. You're not too far from Miami, but in Florida at least. You definitely mention it every once in a while how cold it is in Florida when it's 60 degrees. And,
exactly.
Really, And the best
At
that
least
best
he's
thing
in
I can do
Florida.
in
The reason why he's not at the beach is because he's playing golf. That's why.
best thing I can do in winter is just imagine I am there in the back.
There you go.
So no, but let's dig in a little bit, right? So portfolio, right? We talked about portfolio, we talked about value, but what's the next level down? I mean, when we talk about flow and all these statuses, I mean, what are we talking about? What are the different components that a product portfolio is made of? CK, do you have any thoughts on that?
So it's all about how complex you want to make your organization, right? How much hierarchy you want to bring, how much distance you want to create between your customer and the people who are delivering value to the customer.
Right.
Um, if you are thinking like SpaceX kind of organization or Google kind of organization or Amazon, you want to flatten it out and bring people closer, and that would be directly your value delivery teams, right? And the idea of value delivery is not that you start doing local optimization, all different products together. This is iterating here and that is iterating here while they are required to deliver. Why not iterate on value together and deliver what is the highest value first,
Hmm.
and have the teams deliver that together? Um, it's about, are they all aligned working for the same objective, or are they working on different objectives? Am I trying to figure out, like if you look at it, Amazon shopping portal, because James gave that example, it is not just looking at how my pharmacy stuff is working and how my other stuff is working. When they look at the product, they are looking at the customer interface, and what they are developing is how easy is it for a customer to buy something. And some of the things, if you talk about ease, I am able to use my Amazon account and my Amazon credit card to pay my telephone bills in India.
Hmm.
It's a telephone company which is in India, which takes its own payment system. I have more difficulty using their telephone billing company's payment system to make payments using international cards, and Amazon is able to do that for me. And I do it here, and within 2 minutes, I get a SMS on my India number that the payment is done. So, as James said, that it is never about, when we talk about the customer and when we talk about the organization, think about the organization is there to build revenue, increase profitability, and customer satisfaction increase is a way to keep the customer with you and have the customer keep spending with you. So
Right.
all of that is all about building your customer, building your profitability, right? It is building about your revenues from the same customer. So that's why customer is important, and the ease of customer doing business with you is important. So are we working? So how you want to divide your system, or how you want to create your system, would depend on where you see the value coming in. Now, if I see that there are three lines of work that I have to do parallelly to be able to deliver value, I may put people in those three product streams or three value streams, right? Or I would say that no, I know these are the horizontal components and I can deliver value this way. I will put my teams together to deliver value that way. So I think it has to be very simple. The things start getting complex when we start saying this is the framework, this is how you have to do. But it all starts with the decision making system. Where is your customer? What is it that they value most? What is it that is feasible and that you can deliver to them?
Yeah.
Start getting that.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, I think CK, to add to that,
Yeah.
when I think about this, it's interesting, right? Because unfortunately, most of the frameworks that are out there in the market show a lot of layers.
Hmm.
And a lot of companies feel that, oh, we got to bring the layers in, right? Now, in a lot of companies, what also happens is they already have an organizational structure that lends itself to creating those layers. So what's really happening is as you're moving to this agile portfolio, you're really not changing anything, because what has happened is you've taken a layer based framework, not really understood why the layers should have been there, and you have just implemented that in, right? So it's interesting because I was reading this paper by Larman from Less, right?
Yeah.
And I love how he puts it. He's like, you should be completely flat until you need a layer, right?
Mm,
So Faiz, when you mentioned like, okay, I have a portfolio layer, right?
mm.
In reality, I should be able to just put the teams under it,
I
right?
love.
Now, unless we're talking dependency orchestration or you're talking about these pyramid structures that exist in large organizations, and now
Yeah.
you're trying to redesign that portfolio that says, okay, how do I make this team work with this one team that's isolated somewhere in a different pyramid, right? Yes, I'll need a orchestration layer. But if you're in that mode of a transformation and you have the opportunity to change that organizational structure, that should be like the first internal step that should
Yeah.
be happening as you kind of get there. More often than not, we just say, okay, we're going to put this layer, and we'll cross coordinate. We'll cross
Yeah.
coordinate, right? It's really interesting. I was reading on LinkedIn just this week. Al Shalloway, he posted a really nice note, and he said there should be a fifth kind of agile principle that comes in, okay,
Mm,
in terms of the agile manifesto, right?
Yeah.
And he says you should be fixing challenges instead of accommodating them.
mm.
And that's what we see everywhere. We're
Everywhere.
accommodating these structures and introducing layers. So in reality, you're changing nothing. Okay, my teams are doing Scrum, I'm doing iterations. Yes, I'm agile. That's like the end state that's being called out there. But
Yeah.
the reality is you've
Oh,
changed nothing in that whole process.
yeah. And just to add
Yeah,
to that,
that's beautiful.
Kuldeep, we always hear this challenge: how do we scale in agile?
Hmm.
And my question is, how do you descale your organization?
Love it.
It's not
Yep.
about
Yeah.
scaling in agile; it is
Yeah.
descaling your organization, breaking down those pyramid structures, and you
Yeah.
have scaled in agile. You will
Yeah.
start getting those
Exactly.
results.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, and I mean, this is the language that CEOs talk in these days,
Yeah,
but you want to be able to talk about when you're doing a transformation, when you're building out your system of delivery, you want to talk about first principles, Aristotle's first principles. What
Mm,
are the indivisible principles, elemental fundaments that you want to start with before you start throwing everything out of the box at it, right?
Hmm.
That's what we're talking about here. So that's a critical thing, and that got me thinking on this notion of test-driven transformation, right? So what happens when you're doing test-driven development is you keep writing code until you pass the test, and then
yeah,
when you pass the test, you're done writing code, right? Well, treat your transformation in the same fashion. Continue adding complexity until you meet your goals for what you want to do. And of course, those goals are going to change over time, right? But once you get there, stop. You know, refrain from doing anything else. Don't throw any gratuitous complication or complexity into it. That's so important. I mean, what we're preaching here is you gotta keep it simple. Keep it simple,
Yeah.
right? So I love this conversation. This is
yeah.
so in line with my thinking.
me too. I
And
mean,
no wonder we work together. I work together.
I was just listening to Kuldeep and I was just going like this because he's like it was just so poetic to me because you're absolutely right and CK you're absolutely right. I mean, as we have been going into the organizations and in the last especially 3 4 years as all these different frameworks have come into picture, they are ultimately still trying to work with the way the systems have been built rather than kind of changing the
Yeah.
paradigm, right? And Agile itself is all about changing the paradigm of how we have been working for the last 20, 30 plus years. And now that even like us, like a lot of the transformation coaches even fall in that trap where it's like, okay, how do you make this framework what into fit into this existing scale of the organization? To Kuldeep, your point, so it's basically transformation itself is now changing how transformation is done,
Right.
traditionally in a way. And the trust-driven transformation concept is yet again is something very interesting. And again, when you look at SpaceX example, how much more complex can a product be? I mean, it just boggles my mind when I think about that, and think about the amount of money going into it. Think about the amount of resources, people going into, like, putting an first phase out there and taking that as a rapid prototype or an MVP, and being able to, like, have the courage to be able to put it out there and say we might fail, and they did fail right away, and but then that's the sign of a huge success for now, looking at them and where they are in terms of their stability of the future vision that they had created in the first place, right?
And
It's like
how many
starting to feel like it's happening.
and how many satellites have they sent up there already? And
Exactly.
and now they are coming in as a alternative to the traditional mobile companies and traditional cable companies to us at one fifth the rate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
we were able to
Mhm.
send space this their rocket launch and going to the International Space Station and bringing people back. How much
Yeah.
of a fraction of a cost it is, right? And the
Yeah.
fuel
Yeah.
consumption it is, how efficient it is. So I think the complexities have to be understood and have to be tackled. The challenges have to be tackled. So I read also Al Sholoway's thing, and I was saying, yes, why start accommodating the challenges? Why not start hitting the challenges and start solving those challenges? Start
Yeah.
working in the direction, and why have to build in? So we have got agility, which is like a race car, and we want to bring it into the streets, and we want to now drive on the streets. And now I'm saying, what can I change in this so that I can drive it on the street? But it
Yeah.
was meant for something. If you changed your idea around it and then you used it, then it would be a very different thing. um, we are trying to accommodate agility and not going through their principle to hit into the older organization structure.
Yeah.
um, and that very well excites me. I was in a class from institute, a framework that has come up or is coming up, which is by an institute which supports that structure and everything.
Hmm.
And they are trying to rewrite agility from the perspective that it can accommodate that structure.
Yeah.
It can
Yeah.
support that structure, and it gives comfort feeling to those people rather than telling them that, oh, you are going to have one of the three roles, and look at those three roles where your strengths are and come in and deliver it. So instead of securing our positions, we need to start thinking in a simple way: what is the purpose? How do we go out and how do we deliver value to the customer? Because that's the conversations that the CEOs are having. The CEO's incentive, 60% of the payroll of CEO is dependent on how satisfied their customers are, how much money the customers are bringing in, how much profitability is there, where the stock market is going if you are public listed. And if you are not looking into that thing, everything else is going to be there. And there
Yeah.
will be a CEO like Jeff Bezos who will come out and say, if you cannot deliver, I'll find another team that can deliver to me.
Yeah. See, I think CK, even there, when you think about this now, and you bring it all back in the concept of the portfolio, right?
Yeah.
When we circle back all the way, it's really the alignment of all of these things coming together. If you start thinking of an organizational structure, or you even start thinking, the big one that drives these things is budgets, right? So most of the times, a portfolio will not have a persistent team funding budgeting model. Most of the times the work that's coming in is for these bits and pieces of work, right? Which means now it's very, I don't have the right word for it, but it's almost like saying, okay, you are going to do this for this much money, which is going to keep you occupied for X amount of time, right? We
Yeah.
don't talk about saying that, okay, what does it cost me to maintain a product and its enhancements for, let's say, a yearly basis or a quarterly basis, and then have the value conversation of what do we need to do? Because in this existing model, what tends to fall off completely in any portfolio, right, is the quality of that product. Teams never get the bandwidth to, maintain the work that they're doing. As I in James, harps upon this a lot, is, tech debt. How do you refactor? Every time these questions come up, the portfolio basically says, we don't have money to fix that.
Yeah.
right? They assume it's happening along the way. It never happens along the way because they're always on a time crunch, right? So if we're talking about this agile portfolio coming in, a mind shift that has to happen is consider all the work that's going on in the portfolio, including this kind of work that has to happen, but it always just goes on the backlog.
So I was having this conversation with a client of mine, new client that we are working with, and of course, everybody approaches the same way, saying that you should give stable
Yeah.
funding. I approached it in a slightly different way, and I asked them, "You go through this funding exercise. Can we figure out how much money and time do we spend in this funding exercise?
Mhm.
And can you tell me in the last 10 years, has
Mm.
your funding been stable for the organization that is there to support, or has it changed?" And we only categorize things into three things: keep the lights on, keep the product updated to the environment changing, regulations changing, and number three, increase the functionality of the product. When we looked at it, the funding for the keeping the lights on increased at a very fast pace
Mhm.
because the product was not being maintained, and the funding was always coming in for the new development, uh,
Mhm.
which is just the refactoring. The regulation maintenance was kind of a stable budget, and this they figured out that 40% of their management money was being time and money was being spent in making and discussing about the budgets. And we said you can get rid of all of this if based on the trends, which is what we do, right? Stable, when we look at the predictability and velocity of the team, I said,
Yeah.
if you can, based on your velocity, look at it and say that, okay, I'm going to put 10% extra. Now your discussion should be what is most valuable and where to spend this money, rather than asking me and coming to the CEO and coming to the CFO with this thing. And then in the Excel sheet, they think, okay, I need to cut $5 million, and they cut down one particular thing, they strike it off. In the Excel sheet, it looks all nice, it all balances out. But in the team and the products, the customer faces that magic. You
Yep.
don't see those things, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you know what? These guys, this is what you want to come to this podcast for, right?
yeah,
There's plenty of information about whether or not a scrum master should be a project manager or a project manager, stuff like
yeah,
that, right? All right, but we just talked about two incredibly important subjects when it comes to agile delivery. One is ethical decision making. What Kuldeep, I'd like to think that's what Kuldeep made me think of. You know, throwing these defects to the side, making these kinds of decisions, the pressure from dates, and how do we adjust budget? Which, of course, when you got somebody with Elon Musk's money, he can adjust budget on a continual basis. That's part of why SpaceX is so successful, is they can do that. NASA can't do that, right? But I would love to get into these topics in the future, parking lot topics in the future. I'm about to start on a book called Truth, Lies, and O-Rings. It's that scientist for Morton Thiokol talks about how he would not sign off on the Challenger launch. He didn't sign off on the Challenger launch because he knew that those rings were defective in cold weather, right? But the problem was that they had so much pressure on them. They had so much contractual pressure on them. They were trying to meet these dates. They had defects slipping, all these kinds of things. If you have an agile system of delivery, it supports ethical decision making. That is so critical. So I would love for us to be able to get into these topics in the
Yeah.
future. Ethical decision making and adjusting budget in an agile way. Those are huge topics there,
Yeah.
you know. So I appreciate you guys bringing that up. You're going to get that information here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, James, it's almost time for us to wrap up. And I think it would be what I would like to do is for us to perhaps our next session be focused on interacting with our audience and getting much more engagement from them and
Mm.
open ourselves up for some Q&A. And so this way we can make ourselves available for some of the questions that the people have. and just kind of contributing to the community based on whatever knowledge we can share with them. There are some very, very interesting learnings I've had. For example, there's always all these frameworks that we can always go and use, and in fact we are very much people who live them day by day, whether it's less or scale scrum at scale or scaled agile framework or anything else, right? We use them in our day-to-day consulting conversations. We even train in those frameworks, and there's nothing against using them, but ultimately the mindset is very, very important, right? How do you like, and all of you guys, actually what I learned about the simplicity of it, right? How do you not fall to that right away, and how do you not just open the book and start saying, okay, let's start doing your transformation, this is what this framework says. Okay, to Kuldeep's point, let's add this layer on that layer, and not do that, right? Really look at it from a out of the box perspective, and that's actually what
Right.
we have as consultants to offer. And I feel like there is a tremendous opportunity for us to continue to contribute to this, and I'm looking forward to having some more discussions with you all on these topics. Really, really appreciate all of your time, and looking forward to having many more of these sessions. And those of you who were able to listen to us on YouTube, and I know for some it's really early. There were a lot of the folks stuck through this, and we will be actually posting this also on the social media. So looking forward to having some further interactions in our next sessions. So Kuldeep, thank you. CK,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank
James, welcome and thank you for sharing your
Thank you
passion and
guys. I
knowledge with
appreciate
us.
it very much.
Have an awesome Sunday.
Cheers.
Enjoy it, and I look forward to talking to you guys some more later. Bye.
Absolutely.
Bye,
See
Bye-bye.
ya.
everyone.